Houston.
Welcome to Politics Done Right on KPFT. I am your host, Egberto Williams. This is the progressive program that will take the mystery out of politics. This is the program that will encourage you to make sure government becomes we the people. Whether you are liberal, conservative, or otherwise, you get to air your point of view. Give me a call at 713-526-5738. That is 713-526-KPFT. Remember, you can also send me a tweet to EGBERTOWILLIES. That is at Egberto Williams. Let us engage. It is politics done right. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Well, folks, welcome to one more edition of Politics Done Right. First of all, thank you again for being with us. And notice I said with us, because today we have a great group, Move to Amend, and they're going to be here to give us some information as far as what's going on in the body politic, what is really going on in the country. Well, you know, last week the Supreme Court removed the aggregate limit of dollars that anyone can spend in any election cycle. This puts our entire democracy up for sale to the highest bidder. There are organizations throughout the nation building grassroots movements to amend the Constitution in order to fix this constitutional aberration. One of the most successful ones is Move to Amend. That's the group that we have here today. After the Supreme Court's ruling, an affiliate of Move to Amend, the Houston area Move to Amend, effected a successful protest in Houston. I'm honored to have 3 of their leaders to discuss the corrosive nature of money in our body politic, the apathy that it has caused, and the solutions. Madeline Cozet-Williams, Mike Badziak, and Ben Ball will spend the hour with us and will be ready to answer your questions. So please, folks, remember to give me a call, 713-526-5738. Again, that number is 713-526-KPFT. Please do remember you can also send me a tweet to Egberto Willies. That is at Egberto Willies. So let us engage. Let us engage.
It's time for the weekly blog post.
Okay, so reiterating, in 2010, the U.S. Supreme Court effectively gave us the elections over, or gave the elections over to corporations. They did this with its Citizens United versus Federal Election Commission ruling. That ruling was based on its decision in the Bucky v. Valeo case. Bucky v. Valeo codified that spending money is a form of political speech because speech is a constitutionally protected right and a corporation is considered a person, its speech cannot be restricted. In effect, carte blanche was given to corporate spending on elections. The McCutcheon versus Federal Election Commission is a natural progression of Citizens United. It determines whether an individual can contribute an unlimited amount of money to any candidate. Currently, there is a total of $123,200 that can be contributed by one person to candidates, national political parties, and certain PACs. This includes the $48,600 limit that can be given to candidates. The Supreme Court ruled that the $123,000 amount is unconstitutional. Individual limits per candidate remains. This means ideologically similar plutocrats can now form informal consortiums and provide unlimited money to politicians of their choice. Politicians currently spend an inordinate amount of time raising money for their next election. It means that the moneyed interests have the ear of the politician, not its constituents. If one has any doubt about what this means, one simply needs to look at today's reality. 28% of all disclosed donations, $1.6 billion, was given by 31,385 people, 1% of the 1%. The median donation of the 1% of the 1% was what? 26,584. That is about half the median yearly income of Americans. Polarization, anyone want to ask? 4 out of 5 of the 1% donors gave all their money to one party or the other. Is there any doubt why today's politics have become so caustic and polarized? It is a battle between the plutocrats. The McCutcheon case makes it worse. The average American citizens are simply spectators, seemingly without power. Elections matter, folks. The McCutcheon case proves that. The plutocrats have a stranglehold of the traditional media. However, Americans are not impotent. The fight by the working middle class and the poor continues. They will get their message out. As long as the internet remains open, steady work by the grassroots can mitigate this travesty. We will win. It will take time, but we will win our democracy back. And guess how we start winning that democracy back? Got 3 folks in here, and these guys are the ones that are going to give us back our democracy. And guys like this all throughout the country is going to do it. So let's start with our wonderful lady here, Madeline Cosette. Why don't you tell me a little bit about yourself and what is it that you are doing to start effecting the change that we're talking about?
Okay, well, as Egberto said, my name is Madeline Crozat Williams. I've lived in Houston for about 40 years, and I have been active in a bunch of different on a bunch of different progressive fronts since the beginning of the Iraqi War. I guess my most recent interest in which was Move to Amend started about 2 years ago. After the Citizens United decision, because I realized that if we didn't do something to overturn Citizens United, we literally were going to lose everything constitutionally. We were going to no longer be a democracy. And I feel that in the past 2 years, that's pretty much happened. As a friend of mine who some of you will probably remember from Pacifica Broadcasts a few years ago, and that was Pokey Anderson. Pokey Anderson started calling us a thinly veiled dictatorship a few years ago, and I agree with Pokey. So you were asking what I'm doing. I'm working with working with Move to Amend, and we are working with several other groups in the state. One of them is with Public Citizen. I was in an environmental conference with Public Citizen all day Saturday, and one of the things I brought up at the end of the conference when we were trying to make a list of all of the different environmental fronts on which we needed to approach the legislature, I said, okay, everybody, you're forgetting the big one. If we don't change the Constitution and we don't get corporations out of politics, we're not going to be able to make any of this happen permanently.
Now, that is a shame. Now, Mike, we were speaking earlier today, and there's something that you said that sort of hit home, and I think I want to tie this in a little later. We were speaking about the media, and you had something to tell me about what actually gets covered, and I want to tie that in later on into this McCutcheon case, etc.
Well, you're talking about the revolution,
right?
Yeah, there's a famous poem that was written back in the 1960s, and I don't know the author's name, and I don't know really the source, but it was called "The Revolution Will Not Be Televised." And what this notes to us is that big media, big corporations will not show people who are against their interests. They will not show people demonstrating against them. They will not show people angry about their interference in our democracy. So this is what I mean by we have to do it ourselves and communicate amongst ourselves over the internet and develop our own networks to facilitate this coordination.
I like the word revolution as well, but revolution in a nice sort of way.
Peaceful revolution.
Non-violent.
Peaceful, nonviolent.
Peaceful, nonviolent revolution. Folks, remember, this is a call-in show, so please feel free to give us a call at 713-526-5738. Again, that number is 713-526-5738. Before I get to Ben, I want to remind you guys of something. This is community radio. And in community radio, one of the things that we do is we provide you the type of news that you're not going to get elsewhere. And if you listen to what Mike had to say, Mike was telling something that was quite interesting, and that is, unless we become the media, unless we are out there giving the real message, you ain't getting it anywhere else. Because the corporatocracy is going to be taking over. I saw you.
Yes, I caught something in this morning's paper which really brought this home to me. There's a columnist who appears a couple of times a week. It's a woman, and she's the columnist for the editorial columnist for the Left Wing out of Washington, D.C. Can anybody think of her name? I can't think of her name right now. But anyway, she did an editorial on why the person who's made all their comments, was it Bird, about the Koch brothers,
right,
was really not being fair and should really apologize to the Koch brothers.
Yes.
Because if we were really going to be fair and open in this democracy, we couldn't just go after the Koch brothers. And I thought, boy, we know who's paying you now, left wing or not.
Think about it.
Yeah, I just had another thing to say about the media. KPFT had their 44th birthday celebration not too long ago.
Right.
A beautiful program, great bands, great music, great auction items. Not one word of this was in the media, in the mainstream media.
Exactly.
Where we see daily functions by corporations giving their small donations here and there covered. Their soirees are all covered. The gem of Houston is KPFC, I believe, and not one word was covered in the mainstream media.
That is absolutely and so true. So, folks, remember, get to our website, kpft.org, and drop a tip every so often, because, remember, you're going to get real news here. Now, I want to speak to Ben, and I want to give Ben a little bit of a hard time, because here we are speaking about the corporatocracy, and I think after reading Ben's bio, and before I go ahead, folks, go to the website, go to our Facebook page at Politics Done Right. In other words, facebook.com/politicsdoneright, or go to the website, http://politicsdoneright.com, and see these guys' bios. These are some powerful folks that we have here talking to you. And by the way, that's why you should be calling in here, 713-526-5738. Again, that is 713-526-KPFT. Ben, as one of the bastions of our corporatocracy in the past, before you discovered the greatness of Move to Amend, tell me, how do you feel about what Mike had to say about the corporatocracy really in control of the media and not allowing us to move forward? And how does the McCutcheon case make that worse?
Corporations are bound to operate on behalf of their shareholders. They are not permitted to spend any money whatsoever that doesn't net benefit their shareholders. Therefore, a contribution that a corporation makes to a political candidate or to a political campaign has got to net benefit the corporation. Otherwise, the officers of the corporation are subject to shareholder suits for malfunctioning.
Yeah.
Therefore, a corporation cannot contribute to the best candidate. He can't contribute to the best public policy. A corporation can only contribute where it will benefit directly. And the party or the candidate who receives those contributions is implicitly obliged to at least favor those who gave him money. If I have a neighbor who's sick and I take care of him and feed his dog and run errands for him, there's no explicit quid pro quo, to quote the Supreme Court.
But there's an implicit.
But there's an implicit, and if I needed a favor and I knocked on his door, I would not expect him to say, go to hell and shut the door in my face. So the Supreme Court says there's no even perception of corruption. Well, I don't know where the Supreme Court's been all their life, but in the corporate world, if you do me a favor, I owe you a favor.
Now, and that, folks, is coming from the previous bastion of our plutocracy. What do you think about that, Madeline? What do you have to say?
No, I think he's right.
That it is quid pro quo ultimately.
Yes, and one of the reasons why PACs want to and corporations want to deliver money into to a particular candidate is they think he's going to win, or they'll give it to both candidates if they think they both have a pretty good run for the slot, and they assume that whoever wins will then turn around and pass legislation that favors them.
There can't be any candidate that doesn't receive big corporate money. You can't run you can't run a viable campaign, especially at the national level, without big money. And so with the Supreme Court decisions that we've had in 2010 and in this year, all you have in candidates is a selection that was permitted by that big money. You can only select candidates who've already been chosen by the big money and are therefore obligated to it. That's the end of democracy.
That is so true. Now, one of the questions is, I tell you what, before I get to that question, because I think Madeline's going to handle the 14th Amendment question. Did you process the question?
Well, the caller just called in and asked if you guys could explain how the 14th Amendment is used to uphold the idea of corporate personhood, because she's trying to get her friends to explain it to her, and she's still like kind of
It had to do with slavery, okay? It had to, believe it or, I mean, I hate to say that, but it had to do with slavery, and they actually used what made black folk American citizens to say, okay, we can now use that to make corporations citizens. Let me tell you, caller, I think Mike wants to add to that. Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, my understanding of the 14th Amendment is that it was passed in order to give freed slaves the same rights, the same legal rights as other people. And then corporations started to use this amendment in the Constitution as a reason for giving them rights that people have. In fact, there's some diagram that shows that the first 100 cases in the Supreme Court that cited the 14th Amendment, something like 95 of them were corporate suits, and only 5 pertained to people.
Now, I mean, that is so interesting that they would actually use that amendment that was there to give nationality and freedom to somebody, and somehow turn that into giving the same to corporations. I mean, crazy. But I tell you what, let's go to Barry and talk to Barry. Barry, you're on.
Yeah, congrats on the inaugural show.
Thank you, my friend.
I like his tone so far, but I think this has been overplayed and overblown.
Okay.
You consider the Koch brothers.
Yes.
Koch brothers cannot buy a single more vote today than it could bought last month.
Okay.
All the money does go into advertising and promotion. They can't go out and stand at the poll at the precinct and say we're going to pay $1,000 per head to vote for certain candidates.
Mm-hmm.
To the extent that the advertising and marketing changes votes, that's okay. That's what democracy and freedom is about. If I can do a better job of getting my message out, because I can afford more expensive marketing teams to advertise, that's good. So I think this is freedom, as Supreme Court Chief Justice Roberts say. This is freedom the same way that a newspaper cannot be limited in its endorsements.
Barry, I hear you, and I want so bad to answer you first, but I think Mike is looking at me with those eyes that says I have got to answer Barry. So let's get Mike to talk to you.
Okay, I hope this addresses your question. First of all, that newspapers are a special case in the Constitution, so I don't think they should be considered lumped in with all the other media outlets in this. Second of all, I'm concerned about my vote, the power of my voice in our government. With the McCutcheon, with Citizens United, my equality with my fellow citizens is no longer on par. I'm losing my voice, and millions of people are losing their voices.
One at a time.
Millions of people are losing their voices, and we are losing a democracy. This is my concern.
Okay, we're not losing democracy. Nobody's losing their voice. If the Koch brothers spend another $1 billion on advertising, your vote counts the same way it counted today, the way it counted last year, and the year before that, and the year before that.
No, sir, I am not picking the candidates. The Koch brothers will be picking the candidates.
The Koch brothers not picking the candidates. The Koch brothers are advertising for certain candidates.
And guess why they do that, sir? Guess why they advertise? Because it works.
Exactly. Well, okay, I have no problem with advertising. Advertising goes all the way back to George Washington.
Okay. Okay, hey, I tell you what, Barry, I'm gonna give you a quick answer, and then I'm going to John next. But first of all, in exact terms, you are actually right. In other words, the Koch brothers cannot tell any individual how to vote. Exactly. In the reality-based world, however, they can create an atmosphere and the actions that allows or convinces people to vote a certain way. And you can say, well, that was the other folks' choice. Not if that advertising was led in such a manner that it fomented that type of activity. But Barry, I got to go to another call, but you keep calling, my friend, because someday I'm going to convert you anyway, because I've spoken to you before, my brother. So I'm going to get you. All right, let's go to John. John, come on in, my friend. I think this is my brother from San Antonio. Talk to me, John.
Yeah, good evening, Alberto. Great show. Good evening, Madeline, Mike, and Ben. So I was just wondering if you saw the article in the Huffington Post about how Sean McCutcheon's lawyer, what he had to say today in an interview.
What did he say, John?
Yeah, he said that the Huffington Post asked him, if money is speech, bribery is illegal. Shouldn't bribery be considered an expression of one's First Amendment right?
You are so smart. You're too smart. I'm sorry. You're just too smart.
Beautiful logic.
So money quickly transformed in Backer's reasoning. The court did not say, and really neither does any serious commenter, that money is speech. Money is not speech. Money is a necessary tool to engage in political speech and political association, he said. And then the Huffington Post said, if money isn't speech, then why is it out of line for the government to regulate campaign donations?
Amen.
And he says, it's not out of line. It's allowed to regulate money in elections in order to prevent a quid pro quo corruption. So he said, referencing the narrow definition of the corruption cited by the Supreme Court in the McCutcheon decision. So, I mean, I thought it was kind of telling that even Sean McCutcheon's lawyer is saying, that money is not speech. I mean, because Sean McCutcheon himself was all over the media, and all these Republican politicians are constantly repeating that money is speech. And so now he's backing off of this, which is very strange. He says, only if it's quid pro quo. And so I think it's very strange that would be happening.
Well, John, it's interesting because Ben had something of that nature to say. What was it that you said, Ben, when it came to as a corporate manager or a corporate boss that you were, when you gave money, what happened?
Well, you not only expect it, you must expect to get your money's worth. If you put a billboard up on this highway and pay some money, you're expecting to net a profit from that activity. And if you as a corporation, if a corporation gives money to a political campaign, it expects that campaign to use it in advertising, if you like to call it that.
Exactly.
which works in order to increase that company's profit. Let me give you an example. If a company is in the munitions business, then one of their obligations under the present rulings of the Supreme Court is to give money to candidates who favor war.
Right.
Because that would profit the munitions company. If you're a tobacco company, then you are almost obligated to support candidates regardless of what else they stand for.
And folks,
to promote the tobacco industry, because they would use that then to advertise, to influence voters to vote for those candidates who would support the tobacco industry.
Exactly.
It's just like any other advertising.
Amen. I tell you what, John, I'm going to keep you hot because you always have some good additions to come in with, and I want to go to Hank. So let's see if we can get to Hank. And great. Hank, you are keep John, and let's go to Hank. Okay, Hank, you're on. Talk to me.
Yeah. All right. I want to answer Barry one thing. If we're about free speech and we're about equality and one man, one voice, one man, one vote, the money situation is the equivalent of Barry standing in the crowd trying to talk to people and convince them of his politics, and another guy with a megaphone standing there trying to convince them of his politics. Who do you think is going to be more effective and more likely to sway votes?
I think Madeline is dying to respond to that description.
Well, yeah, it's a question of who you're going to hear and what you're going to listen to. I used to teach visual merchandising at the University of Houston, so I understand how these advertisements work, and I can guarantee you if somebody can afford 10 advertisements and the other candidate can afford one, visual merchandising works extremely well, and so does subliminal advertising. The candidate who can afford the 10 ads is going to be the one who's going to probably win. I mean, if we're assuming...
Ralph Nader.
I'm sorry?
Or we might have had Ralph Nader.
Oh. Well, actually, considering what's happening right now, that might not have been so bad. Things might have really changed.
I would welcome it.
We wouldn't be where we are today, would we?
No.
But, I mean, that is the analogy that I wish more of us, including, for all of us that are in this business of, and I call it a business because, before I forget, I better do a station ID. Folks, this is KPFT 90.1 in Houston, Galveston 89.5, Huntsville 89.7, Goodrich, Livingston 90.3. Please remember, this is a call-in show, 713-526-5738. Again, that number is 713-526-KPFT. And my engineer is saying, Egberto, you're doing it right this time. And I'm so happy to hear that.
One more thing in there.
Yeah, come on in again, Hank.
Hey, for all you history buffs out there, look at what was happening in Italy just prior to World War II.
Yes, tell me.
Industrialists were taking over the government.
And remember the name of the fascists, right?
What's happening with our government now?
Mm-hmm.
Industrialists are taking over our government.
Mm-hmm. I love when you have callers like yourself with perspective, because you came with that one call. Those were two very large insights. You brought in fascism and you brought in the megaphone. I don't know what else best explain what we're talking about here, Mike. Isn't that right? Fascism and a megaphone.
Right. There's something else I wanted to say that a few weeks ago on the PBS station there was a program called the issue was the hidden state. Mm-hmm. I don't know if some of you have seen that.
No, I haven't.
Anyway, they talked about the fact that government can shut down. Our Congress was totally shut down. The government was shut down, but behind the scenes, the corporations are still manipulating, still making money, still getting income, no matter what government does. So,
right.
Are they a separate entity now that can keep running on government sponsored funds without the government functioning at all?
Yeah, I mean, actually, they can. Yes, Madeline.
I think you can find a reference to that if you go onto Bill Moyer's website. I think that was through Bill Moyer's, wasn't it?
Either Bill Moyer's or the one of the other. I don't recall.
Well, I tell you what, I bet John has something to say about what Hank had to say, because this is right up the alley. We talk about that sometime. John, come on in.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But one thing I do want to say, though, is, it's from a historical perspective, the era of the robber barons, and, I mean, if you're looking at the last half of the 19th century, and then the progressive movement, I mean, this is something that was very similar. And, of course, back in those days, you couldn't even elect your own senator. That didn't happen until 1913, I believe.
Right.
And so, the country was just, the inequality was just incredibly massive. And there were so many poor people, immigrants working in menial jobs. And, that continued to some degree. I mean, it was great. You had people like Eugene Debs in 1912 who got 6% of the vote in the Socialist Party, and you had a general more of an awakening. But then things really didn't change that much until FDR came into power. But there's always been this, money has always been in the picture. Gore Vidal writes about this all the time, but even when we think about the era of let's say I consider it the greatest era for American prosperity, let's say starting in the 50s and going on until the trickle-down era. And now, money is just creeping up again, and it's just been, it's just been such an influence, and it's just really, really sad that people are letting this happen, because it's very important that people stand up, and that's why it's great to hear the people are talking. I've done a little bit. I've I got 3 people here in San Antonio, and the Texas representatives, Ruth McClendon and Trey Martinez Fisher and Mike Villarreal, who's my representative, and they all signed on to get a constitutional amendment to overturn Citizens United. Of course, the problem is, right, in Texas you have, 1/3 of the state house and 1/3 of the state senate. And so, we've got a long way to go.
Yep.
But for those 16 states that have already made a lot of strides, I mean, we need to get up to 38 states. And,
we will.
It seems like a tough goal, but we just have to chip away. And one other thing that I do disagree with a little bit.
Hold on one second, John, because I think Ben is trying to get in here.
Well, there's 2 subjects that we've talked about. What is the importance of money in campaigns and how it can influence the results of campaigns? We've talked about the fact that corporations have to get their money's worth. What we haven't really talked about much is this personhood thing, which is just as absurd as it can be. Back when I was doing expert testimony, and I've done that for about 30 years now, the law has always distinguished between a fictional person and a natural person. And it's almost like we're playing word games now. The Supreme Court they're playing word games with our lives. They've said that these fictional persons, which are corporations, the word corporation, incidentally, comes from the same word as corpus, or
body.
It means body, like corpus delicti. Mm-hmm. It's a body, it's a thing, but it's not a person, it's a thing. It's a person, it's not a thing. And the crucial difference in influence in campaigns is that real persons have a conscience. The whole basis of democracy is that real people know right from wrong. A corporation by law is forbidden to know right from wrong. A corporation's job is to do everything they can that's legal. Not that's what's right, but everything they can. And in a competitive environment, if a corporation doesn't do everything that's legal, they'll lose business. But a corporation does not have what a person has and what democracy assumes that persons have, and that is an intrinsic sense of right and wrong.
You've just defined the reasons for regulations, because you just said the magical word, the corporation must do what is in the fiduciary best interest of its shareholders, whatever it takes.
And whatever is, as I've heard several corporate executives, what is marginally legal. They want to bump up against the law. They really don't want to violate the law. Most corporations do not want to violate the law.
Spoken like a businessman.
But they want to exploit it. Mm-hmm. That's their job, to exploit the law. And if we don't like what they're doing, we change the law.
True. And
violating the law costs them big money in legal fees.
That's right. They're dumb but not stupid.
Yeah.
But you wanted to say something, Madeline?
Yeah. Well, the other important thing that we totally have lost sight of is that at the time of the American Revolution, the founding fathers were very anti-corporation. Remember the Boston Tea Party, which occurred because a corporation, a British corporation, was imposing huge duties on tea. So they got so mad they went out and they threw all the tea into the harbor and just destroyed it. Well, so after the Constitution was written, there were limits on corporations. Corporations had charters which limited the amount of time they could exist, and also which stated that they had to do certain things which were for the public good, and that's pretty much been forgotten. And that position for a corporation was upheld in the Marbury versus Madison case, but somehow after the Civil War in the 1880s, beginning with Santa Clara versus Southern Pacific Railroad, the idea that corporations were people started to creep in, and with every succeeding Supreme Court case, the attorneys pushed it a little bit farther. So we're where we are today.
Madeline, Walker, I'm coming to you next, but I want to ask Madeline something. Bring him, but I want to ask, before I take you, I want Madeline to sort of tell us a little bit about legalized democracy, because you just brought in the premise to that documentary that was made by Move to Amend, Legalized Democracy. It starts, well, maybe I'll just say it. We actually started that thing showing where every American had to first fight for their rights. The population actually got their rights, and then slowly over time, it got eroded by the 9 people up there in the Supreme Court. So there was another means to move that. Let me bring Walker in, and then I bring you in, Mike. I'm sorry, Gary, come on in.
I have a naive question. Understanding that the Supreme Court is basically meant to support the Constitution of the United States and mediate between the legislative and the executive branch, and it's so obvious what this McCutcheon decision is doing to the concept of one man, one vote, which is the basis of our entire democracy. I'm wondering, is there a reason, is there something behind the scenes as to why these justices would intentionally undermine the concept of the Constitution of the United States?
Let me just let Mike answer that, and then I think Madeline wants to as well. So both of you, why don't you answer that for me?
Well, I wanted to tell you that the poet that wrote The Revolution Will Not Be Televised, his name was Gil Scott Heron.
You're a good man. You are a good man. I tell you what, please remember to do one thing. Go to facebook.com/politics done right, and please put that under the show, because there are a lot of people that are going to want to hear that.
Well, you should never mention a poem without mentioning the poet.
You are so right. You are so right, sir, and that is Mike's fault. I'm not going to take responsibility for that. So, Mike, since it's your fault, why don't you answer Gary?
The question.
Now, the question was. Repeat your question again, Gary.
Well, I'm wondering, it's very unusual that the Supreme Court, whose objective is to support the Constitution, would go so contrary to the concept of one man, one vote by allowing this money to be injected into our system, This has been going on for 20 years. Everyone's been talking about how, the lobbyists are buying the Congress and money.
Well,
So true. Let's
And-
go ahead and answer it there, Mike.
I'm afraid.
Is there more to this story than we know? Why would they?
I believe there is more to the story, definitely more to the story, and I'm afraid all I can come up with is at this point is rumors that justices have been seen in the company of corporations going to retreats and this and that. But I'll let people better.
I think
better.
Madeline wants to do it, but I think Ben thinks he has the ultimate answer. So let's take Madeline first, and then Ben is going to have the ultimate answer.
Well, I think it has a bit to do with money, and I think it has a bit to do with which presidential administration appoints these Supreme Court justices and where the political leanings of that particular administration lie and where their support for large corporation lies. And I think if we look at the history, the answer's right there.
All right. Now, Ben, you heard those two answers that were pretty darn similar. What say you?
Very, very different answer. My answer is very different. Constitution's a beautiful thing and unique in all of history. And one of the things it recognized was that people make errors. And that's the checks and balances that you hear between the three different parts of the government that they invented, that these guys invented in 1790. And a provision, one of the greatest provisions for the in the Constitution is the provision to revise the Constitution in order to correct errors. And the Supreme Court is made up of human beings, and they goofed. And their Constitution says when they goof, we can change the Constitution, and that's what we're about. Let me give you an example. In 1760, the Supreme Court ruled in the Dred Scott decision that if a person happened to be black, 1860. If a person happened to be a black, he was not a person. He was a thing.
True.
In 2010, the Supreme Court ruled that if a thing has the word corporation in its name, then it's not a thing, it's a person. And both of those, the first error was corrected with the Civil War. Hopefully, this error that the Supreme Court made in 2010 will not take a civil war, but all it takes is the 28th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution.
That was a very good answer. I love the way you brought that around. I really like the way you brought that around to the 28th Amendment. I think everybody at Move to Amend is going to be jumping with joy with the words that you just said. Now, interesting enough, you're right about the elastic clause in the Constitution. You're absolutely right about that. I think, though, the difference between when I would have been considered 3/5 of a man as opposed to now is that there was a certain culture back then. Yes, that was evil back then and all that good stuff. But today, this is sort of an evil that is being effected not by a mass, but by a select few. These guys, as Mike and Madeline alluded to, they are actually, to put it bluntly, I think Mike didn't say it quite that squarely, they're bought. In effect, our Supreme Court judges, if you listen to Clarence Thomas ruling on the McCutcheon case was, he wants to remove all the limits completely. Then you see that his wife is in bed with all these different entities, that you can see exactly why it is that he well, you know what I mean.
Isn't the entire point
yes.
of the existence of the Supreme Court to be totally impartial to the political
in the real world, nobody's impartial.
True.
You've got this side and that side, and they're supposed to say, okay, well, this doesn't comply with the Constitution, so we're sorry. And, the previous caller talking about fascism was the conglomeration of corporate power and government power. So
Right.
Are we on the verge of fascism here?
Yes, there's no doubt about that.
Yes.
There's no doubt about that, and that is why we are fighting this battle right now so hard. Because you are correct. We are on. We are saying we are on the verge. I think we are here at a soft fascism right now.
Are we an oligarchy now?
Yes, we
Yes.
are an oligarchy.
Yes, definitely.
Madeline says it right.
Yes.
We're an
As
oligarchy.
far as I know, Move to Amend does not have any large corporate contributors.
Yes. Let me get Don, Ben, and let's let Don Sinclair come in. Come on in, Don.
Hello.
How you doing, sir?
You're having the program on corporate personhood.
Yes, we are. Yes, we are.
I I would like to get the people on your panel to comment on, as an example of why this is so important, to comment on the accumulative effect of a lot of money being spent over the airways and in the news, and the difference it makes.
Great. I think Ben wants to answer your question. So, Ben, why don't you answer the young man?
Hello, Don. Good to hear from you.
Well, hello. Then I was thinking about the kind of things that are being said that are not true
Oh,
over the air.
okay. Over the air,
By us?
Yes.
not by
and on the
us.
television.
Oh, we were getting concerned there,
You had
Don.
us worried.
Found a lot of things that are not true.
Right.
And I don't have any way to reach back and answer that.
Okay, I'm going to let
There's a great deal of difference in how much power money has.
Don, you're correct. I am going to let Don answer that. Ben answer that question. But before, I need to give a quick station ID. And that is, you're listening to KPFT, Houston 90.1, Galveston 89.5, Huntsville 89.7, Livingston 90.3. This is 713. Please give us a call. Remember, our number is 713-526-5738. Again, that number is 713-526-KPFT. And guess what? Go for it, Ben. Answer Don.
Okay, Don. Of course, it's well known that underneath the underlying problem is the increasing disparity between the rich and the poor and the absence of the middle class. And the control that the big money has of the government is simply a result of that.
And people do not get represented back home when the people in the offices are liable to these corporations with money.
You cannot be a viable candidate even without selling your soul to big money.
That's right.
Television programs
Now,
cost too much.
Your vote and your speeches and your writing in the newspaper, even the little paper we get here, is all one-sided. And money does that.
Well, the concentration is increasing. Big industry now owns the media. That's certainly one of the reasons you do not see investigative reporting. Why would a big corporation that owns a big television station have that television station investigate itself, instigate its own industry? So as the money increases to concentrate, we're all paying the price, and we've got a moneyocracy. And the first crucial step to stop that is to get big money out of politics completely and put it back in the hands of the people.
Okay.
I was listening, and I felt like there are so many examples of how big money has the upper hand in this struggle on the news. I don't have the money to buy television stations.
But you know what you have
Big
the money
money
for,
has the money
Don?
to do that.
Don, you know what you have the money for? You have the money to invest in the groups like our Houston group here, the Move to Amend, and the KPFTs, and all these organizations that's working with the grassroots that take $5, $10, or whatever to actually.
You're trying to encourage me, and I don't need that. What I need here is the sincerity of this occasion, where I do have a vote, but it's November before I get to use it.
But you know what?
By that time, big money can tell this country anything.
Hey, guess what, Don? And you also have a voice, because you are right here on the radio putting that out right now. So remember, you have just gotten a voice, and Madeline wanted to address that as well.
Yes, I did, because I thought, as I said earlier on the program, this past Saturday I was at a conference in Austin on the environment, and the person who did the closing was Smitty, Tom Smith, who is the head of the Public Citizen Office in Austin, which, by the way, is the only public citizen Austin outside of D.C. And what he said is that the only way they have ever successfully gotten legislation through before was by doing it on a grassroots level, which means that you have to go out and tell your neighbors. And of those neighbors, you're going to have to find some that will go out and tell more people. We really need to spread the word. I mean, there are 3 of us here. There are about 6 of us who are active in this organization. I'm going to be honest with you. That's not going to cut it. We need hundreds of you out there to be active. We need you to be calling your legislators and telling them what you want. Right, and you need, when it comes time to lobby the legislature, we're going to have you and everybody who thinks like you in there lobbying with us. And we need your numbers out there going and telling people what it's really like and what the real news and the real truth is now.
Go ahead, Mike.
You'll get that, but if I had $100 million,
we'd take that.
Would matter more in this election.
But you'd be surprised how many groups are around the country in Move to Amend, and how many organizations like Move to Amend are concerned about these same issues. This is something like you say, you never hear on mainstream media, that there are literally millions of people who are starting to get pretty disgusted with the way things are going. And
now, I want to ask you something.
Yes.
Why is it that 75% of this country believes what you just said? They are against corporate personhood, but they cannot change that law unless the representatives in Washington vote to change it. And the reason we're having such a hard time is they've already been bought and sewed up and promised a future.
Don, I want to answer that one, and I'm going to first tell you thank you very much for calling, but we're going to have to move on. But here's the deal. You're right that 75% of the people believe what we're talking about. You're right that the politicians are doing nothing about it. And the reason why is that we as a people have not yet forced them to do it. Now, that is what we're working on, and we're doing it slowly, one person at a time. And if you know about geometric progression, you know that eventually it is going to happen. So all we tell the people that are following us right now is that you have to be out there doing your thing. But before we close today, and John, I'm going to give you 30 seconds in a minute, but I want to talk to the Move to Amend folks here and ask them to tell me a little bit about how your protest went, because immediately after the McCutcheon case came down, they were out there on the streets with signs letting their neighbors know what was going on. So let me start with Mike. Tell me a little bit about the protest.
We had a great protest on the corner of Post Oak and Westheimer the evening of the decision. We had about 25 to 30 people out there. We had actually got 2 television crews out there, one from Television and one from the ABC network here. We had KPFT out there. That evening, both television stations showed video of a protest, and so we feel we had success. There were also 130 similar protests around the country. So this was not only here, it was all around the country, and little by little, as Egberto says, that we'll get the critical mass.
Thank you, Mike. Tell me a little bit about how you felt about it.
Well, I have to say, first I was disappointed because we had done some really good interviews with Univision. We had a really good Spanish speaker representing us, and we also had done some good interviews with ABC. And then, of course, that was the day that those horrible shootings took place
yes.
at Fort Hood, and they literally took over the news broadcast. But even with that, although they did not show the interviews, they did show film footages of the demonstration, and that actually surprised me that they did air that.
Which means it was good. Ben, were you at the protest at all, or you stayed home this time? You stayed home this time, huh? Well, Ben stayed home. John, give me 30 seconds. I have to hold you to a tough 30 seconds.
Yeah, I just want to say, it's been a great show. I really enjoyed it. A few things that could happen, if there is a change in the government, hopefully we'll get people more responsive, like having actually have the Disclose Act, which was introduced right when Citizens United came out. If that were to get passed, I think that would change, quite a bit. Once corporations are exposed, a lot of them, really don't want to give money. The reason why they're giving so much money right now is because the dark money is available, and they don't have to be exposed. But once they are exposed, I think that they're gonna the money will dry up. And as
Amen.
Far as
Got to drop you there, man. Thank you very much for calling in, John. Hey, guys, remember, please go to the website, politicsdoneright.com. Please go to the Facebook page, facebook.com/politicsdoneright. Now, please remember, this is very important. KPFT is you, and you at any time can ensure that we continue. I want to thank our guest for being here. Move to Amend, Mike, Madeline, Ben. You guys are the stars of the show. You guys are what make a whole lot of people do what they're doing, okay? Because just going out there and being really, say a quick 10 seconds, folks. Quick 10 seconds.
Okay, one thing, I'd like to say really fast, which not directly related to HAMTA, if you really want to find out where the money's coming for in politics to the best it can be researched, go to opensecrets.org.
Thank you. Quick 10 seconds.
I just want to plug our other organization, Texans United to Amend, a statewide organization of over 20 groups around the state.
If you want to do something concrete, go to movetoamend.org and sign the petition.
Yes.
Very, very important. Very, very important. Thank you very much, folks. This has been Politics Done Right. One more night, and we'll be back next week with this again. You have a wonderful night. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for listening to Politics Done Right. I am your host, Egberto Williams. You can personally reach me by sending an email to egberto@politicsdoneright.com. Remember, Egberto is spelled E-G-B-E-R-T-O. Change starts with you. 90.1 KPFT gives you information not tainted by corporate interest. Please visit kpft.org and contribute. Let's ensure continued access to real information and news remain available to all. Again, thank you very much for listening to Politics Done Right.